Hey everybody, it's Tuesday.
And welcome to this week's edition of Hook, Line, and Striker.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. Thanks for being here with us tonight.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's been a really long time since we've been here with you guys. And it's not. It's been just a regular week. So amazing. It must have been a bunch of awesome stuff that happened between then. And even thinking back, that is true. For one of the first times, Josh and I actually split up for the weekend to kind of do two different fishing events. And you went north. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Hey Ryan. We just I went up north with my buddies from work. They kind of set something up while we were up north the previous weekend, and I got back and they said, "Hey, you're going with?" And I said, "Oh, okay." So we went up there. We had a bunch of challenging weather. It was kind of warm, and then really windy and snowy, and then very cold, and then warm again on Sunday. So we took advantage of the nice weather and took some pictures. We were lucky enough to be in a cabin that was close enough to the lake that we could just kind of tip up fish from the lake. We used some blue tips and some other stuff so we could monitor flags. And we fished all day and into the night and got a couple fish. But it was just a fun time.
And I was a little bit south of you. And I actually even visited the Battle on Bago event. So anybody who's familiar with Lakewood products, they are soft-sided hard cases. They're awesome. And they go and they support the event. So I was there with them, and the camaraderie in the tent is always really, really an awesome time. With that being said, though, wind was the name of the game for this past weekend. So anybody who's heard anything about Battle on Bago, it was kind of hectic and kind of crazy, especially for those people who are unfamiliar or new to the lake. But, where Josh found a whole bunch of snow up north and travel was kind of crazy, we had the opposite conditions, and that wind blew all the snow right off the ice. And we had those glare conditions. And so even Sunday, I found a little spot for a crappie hole. And, you got to make sure you're wearing your spikes. Have that, because you are going to be sliding around everywhere out there.
Yeah, when the weather's like that, you got to have your cleats on.
Kind of a funny situation. I did quite a bit more ice than what Josh did up north. And so, Ryan is saying different cars went in a Battle on Bago. When you are on a big body of water, the most important thing is kind of knowing the conditions. So staying up to date with the local fishing clubs and all the different organizations that support that. And ultimately, know your own ice conditions. Make sure that you're checking along the way and all of that and being as safe as possible. So.
Yep.
For those of you at home, let us know where you're at. Let us know your ice conditions, or let us know how fishing is going for you, because I would love to hear about that. And otherwise, let's bring our guest in and kind of hear about that too. So Kimber, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So for anybody who maybe doesn't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am a registered nurse. I'm based out of Menominee Falls, so fairly close to the Milwaukee area. And then anytime I have free time, I am trying to sneak out and do outdoorsy stuff, predominantly fish or kayak.
Fishing and kayaking, kayaking is a huge focus, I guess, recently. Boats are a whole bunch of fun, but kayaks, I think, sometimes are a little bit more affordable, but they can get into places that boats cannot. So actually, we might get into that a little bit later into the show, because, looking towards spring, I think there's a lot of people even looking towards kayaks. But with that being said, I've also got to ask, have you been on the ice recently?
I have. I snuck out today. We have ice storms over here. It was not pretty. I know better when the weather is terrible. I should not go out and try to fish. We caught very cute little bluegills. But this last weekend, we were out of Milwaukee on Lake Michigan. Had some awesome steelhead action, like the best I've had all season. So Lake Michigan seems to be doing pretty well.
And starting back, even with those little bluegills, it's kind of funny because with that harsh weather, sometimes you go out there and that snow condition will make that bite happen, and sometimes it does the opposite. So always kind of funny to see which day it's going to be. But what a huge transition to go from bluegills to the big fish on the big lake. So, I mean, I guess you must have a huge range of tackle. I mean, how do you balance all that in your car and everything?
I do. So like I have an inland setup and then I have a Lake Michigan setup. I don't know. I actually use a lot of my ultralight stuff out on Lake Michigan too, ice fishing. I just make sure my drag is set very appropriately. So if somebody very big is going to be tearing out a ton of line, they are not going to break my cute little panfish poles. So honestly, a lot of the stuff I do take out on Lake Michigan. Last season, I mean, I caught a 14-pound brown on my ultralight tiny panfish setup. But yeah, I made sure that drag was clicked to very light because my pole was like this and my drag was super light. So you just got to be careful if you're going to chance bait and use your ultralight gear.
That is actually a really interesting point that you're making, though, because, I can't say that I'm super familiar with that type of fishing. And we always joke because we always try it one time per year. And we've so far always like kind of sucked at it.
That's true.
But we've gotten a little bit better every year and we've learned something each year. And one of the things that I personally kind of still struggle with in that whole situation is trying to find the right rod. Because I don't necessarily know even what I'm looking for in the beginning, something that'll stand up to a big fish, and so I really appreciate hearing you even talk about using some of that existing gear to bring it out onto the ice, because that's something that people really can relate to. So with that, is it just about changing your line so you have strong enough line or just a good drag?
I use really light line, and honestly, my boyfriend has caught a phenomenal trout on 2-pound test. I personally probably would not have landed the trout he has landed with that 2-pound test, but most of my gear is all a 6-pound test. I just make sure I am neurotic about checking my drag. Every time we go out, I am checking it just to see how tight it is, depending on the weather conditions, because sometimes when it's colder, it tends to run a little tighter, and I'm always adjusting it just to make sure no matter what I hook into, I am not going to have it snap my line. But I do tend to run really light stuff. So use what you have and just check that drag. If you have to work the fish a little bit longer, it's all good. You will get it in. The fish will get exhausted after they run a couple of times, and you will get them in eventually.
And then what are you using for bait on that, I guess?
So on Lake Michigan, we use a ton of spawn sacks. Like that is just the go-to of choice. And honestly, it's one of those things like my boyfriend a lot of times will collect the eggs, and sometimes we like to do a really cutesy date night. It's like arts and crafts time where we tie spawn sacks together. You never know what color they're going to bite on, so would highly suggest a variety of colors. But yeah, spawn sacks usually tend to be the way to go. And if you don't have spawn sacks, start with minnows. We use Automatic Fisherman a lot. They are freaking fantastic, especially with the trout. I also do really good on perch with them for whatever reason, but yeah, they are freaking fantastic for the trout. So we'll set spawn sacks on those a lot of the time, and they are great. But yeah, if you don't have them, start with minnows. Wait until you catch somebody who's dropping eggs, then collect the eggs and tie your own spawn sacks.
Gosh, I guess I know nothing about tying spawn sacks. So my first place would probably be YouTube. I don't know. But when you're out there fishing, is that like a really, if you're using lighter tackle or lighter gear, is that a lighter bite or they still kind of crush it and the rod doubles over?
They still crush it and the rod doubles over. Even my kayak gear is all set really light. So my line on my kayak gear is actually 12 pounds fluoro. Yeah, fluoro, right? Okay. Sorry, as I'm checking with the person I helps to pick out mine, aka my partner in crime. But yeah, right.
We have different strengths too.
I know, seriously. So yeah, all of my kayak stuff is 12-pound. I have got 28-pound kings on that. So I make sure to set so that if a fish wants to tear out 200 feet of line, that they can, and then I will slowly work it in. If I need to crank it tighter as they start to get tired, I can, but I leave it pretty light.
That's pretty good to hear, because a lot of times you hear a lot about upsizing and getting bigger gear, and sometimes that can be a detriment, right? If you don't get the right action, if you have heavier gear and you have too fast of an action, you can end up pulling hooks. Um, as a mainlander, I just want to jump back to the whole spawn sack thing. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Great Lakes trout fishing, the trout aren't able to spawn on our inland the inland Grand Lakes. So, but they still have their still egg cycle and stuff. So those fish are stocked. The eggs just go to waste. Really, they feed whitefish, perch mostly. And but you'll get those fish running towards spawn time, and you'll know when they're ready because you'll pull them out of the hole and they'll be falling out, and you can it's just like a gentle pat on the belly and they'll push out, and then you can still release that fish and she'll be fine. And then the process is you take those eggs, you put them in a Ziploc or something, and you can dye them, right? There's different people with different little brines and dyes that you can go get. And then it's just like, I don't know.
It's like a little mesh cloth.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you just tie it up and then you hook a little bag of eggs on there. So for those of you out there that don't know any, that's kind of the process quickly, I guess.
Yeah, and like if you go to like R&R Fishing Hole in Cudahy or Lake Michigan Anglers, they have all the stuff you need to tie a spawn sack to, and they will walk you through how to do it if you need to.
And a really fun thing, one last thing, is if you go to the bait shops down in your area, a lot of those guys will have some tied up. So even if you just want to see an example, or if you just want to buy a little cup for the day, they sell those too down there by you guys.
Well, and like, let's be honest. So R&R, I spend a lot of my money there. They usually have my fishing report like handed to them because I love those guys. So like, if you go in and you ask them where you should go fish, they're really helpful. And yes, they usually have spawn sack too. Sometimes we've actually donated the eggs there. So
that's awesome.
Spud is asking if you are using fire brine dye, or I think he threw out another name, pouts. I don't know how to actually pronounce that, but I mean, I guess that goes back to everyone kind of has their own way of doing that.
Yeah, and I would say like try different stuff, see what works for you. Everybody's got a little different recipe. It's like your grandma's secret pie recipe. Like, I'm not going to give away my specifics, but try some different things, see what works for you.
Okay. Also, how often do you like renew them? Like I imagine that like, you put a worm on your hook and it kind of just gets limp after a while and you change it out. Like how often do you have to change out that spawn sack?
So with the spawn sacks, we typically change them out every hour just because like they tend to kind of leach everything out of them within an hour. So we do change them pretty frequently.
Okay, so that actually leads to my big question then, because the hardest part about this is getting those darn things off your hook. What is the key for that? Just do you rip them off, or what's the deal?
I actually have a hard time with that too. I have a little scissors that I'm putting in my bag because I have the hardest time. Like my hands are already cold, now they're wet, and I'm trying to pull this mesh off and it's hooked on. Yeah, little scissors.
That's awesome. It's always when I'm like getting ready to leave and I'm like, now I can't get this thing off of here. It's always the last thing I'm fumbling with. It's like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, for the longest time, I would leave them on there till I got home because I was like, my hands are cold. I am over this. I don't even want to deal with this. And then I just wait and take them off when I got home. But yeah, like I just invest in a little pair of scissors and I make sure they have a little sheet I can stick them in. And yeah, I just cut them off now because it's a pain in the butt.
That's awesome. And then I guess one of the other things to note as we're talking about this, we had started the show talking about, a reference to Battle on Bago, knowing the conditions of big water. And that absolutely applies to a conversation like this. Because when you are like, let's say you find a harbor or sometimes there's a river nearby, that big water situation, either way, those are conditions that actually change very fast. Those rivers, especially, those big waters, especially, but even the harbors, it's easy to feel safe. But don't forget about different aerators and stuff that are put out around those harbors. So I guess like you look like you know all about that. Tell us a little bit more.
So our spud bars go out with both of us all the time, no matter what, just because also there's a lot of drains, and especially in the harbors, and you never know, like, oh, was it a little bit warm yesterday? A little too warm? Was there a lot of flow moving through that drain? You never know. So we take spud bars everywhere and we are pretty cautious about it. We honestly don't drive on a whole lot of stuff just because like you never know. Especially when it comes to Lake Michigan, we don't ever drive on anything. But yeah, we are pretty cautious about spud barring everything. Also, as the winds change, a lot of times you have to be really cautious of the edges, like of Summerfest Pond or some of the more common areas. Like if it was windy and the water levels are changing and there's more current, you have to be really careful along the edges. Sometimes you have to bring a bar, make sure you spud bar, just because sometimes those edges will be really soft as well. So you definitely have to be careful. Just spud bar no matter what. And I always wear picks and I always wear a float suit. Even in the dead of winter, like there should be like 1 to 2 feet in most areas now, but with Lake Michigan, you just can't ever be sure. So be ultra careful.
Well, and actually, that is a great reminder, even going into, I hate to say the end of our season here, because, there's
No,
so
me
much ice.
too.
I know it doesn't feel like that, but, some years ice is winding up by this point.
Mhm.
And, we do have a lot of ice out there, but like you're saying, that's one of those times if those shores start going fast, it's almost the hardest time to be an ice fisherman because,
Mhm.
if I could just get out there, then I'll be on good ice out there, but it's the getting back part also that you have to worry about. So when you're checking those conditions, don't even just check them for that moment, but if you can try to anticipate, is the day warm? Is it really windy? Is this going to shift in any way? Because these are the times of the season where that's going to happen.
Yeah, and we definitely keep a very close eye on the weather the whole day and just kind of keep an eye on our surroundings, period, because you never know what is going to happen and you have to be ultra careful.
Yeah. One of the other things that we were talking about kind of a ways back, actually, but I'm going to bring it back up, that automatic fisherman.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that are really getting into those auto setups coming up here, but also does come with a note. Make sure to check your regulations of where you're at,
Yeah.
because I know places like Minnesota, you just
Minnesota.
yeah. But as far as a piece of equipment that really does transition from that big water to all of your other adventures, how does that work out?
I am totally addicted to them. I started with them probably 2 years ago. Um, they are great. I do fantastic with panfish and perch. So I have two pole setups. I have like my trout and panfish setup, and then I have a really heavy pike setup because pike and their damn teeth. But I freaking love them because honestly, so you bells on them, you set them up. I mean, you got to experience them when you go with me, but like they do all the work for you and all you have to do is set them and then reel the fish in. They are fantastic. I don't think I can go back to tip ups ever after using them because they are great. And yeah, I have had the best luck with perch this year. I don't know why. I'm not even setting for them a lot of the time, but I have caught some monster perch, which is totally new to me, and it has been a blast. Um, there's slackline bobbers, so if you want to set them so the fish can run, you can set slackline bobbers for them. Otherwise, for the trout, we don't tend to use slackline bobbers. You tend to just leave them just line line straight, and they are freaking great because the trout, they're pretty like they will grab it quick, run a little, and then they tend to let it go. So if you don't have a quick hook set, you're not gonna get them. So they have been awesome. I am low key in love with them.
Well, and as far as the transition to the other waters, I actually have used them before, but I do have to say, we were actually on the ice together not long ago, and you had one set, and I don't know if everybody does this, but I feel like I haven't really seen this, but you had bells attached to the top, and that's just like what people normally use for like, I don't know, bank fishing and stuff, right?
Yeah. So honestly, it's really nice because if you don't hear it pop, then yeah, you have the bells ringing, so you'll hear it. And I walked away and I was like, anybody that hears the bells, go catch that fish. And Emily freaking nailed it.
Well, it's funny because like I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't listening for it, but it just really did catch my ear. So, as far as an alert system, I mean, that really did work awesome. And it was funny because I looked around, I was waiting for somebody else to go first, and I don't think I've ever ran for a rod that fast in my life. Just for a perch, but it was awesome.
Hey, it was a nice perch. It's all good. But yeah, I love the bells because no matter what you're doing, sometimes I get distracted if the fishing is slow. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go grill some brats or like look at the pretty sunrise, whatever. Those bells will draw you in, and you are like, oh, fish on, and you go running for it. They're great. I love them.
And it's funny. And I've heard from, other trout fishermen that also love these that because there's like a part, I don't know if it's called the hammer, but they're like, you hear the hammer fall,
Mhm.
dink. And it's like, yeah, but my ear isn't tuned into that. Like, even though I am listening for it and I want to hear it, like, especially when you're fishing, sometimes close to Milwaukee by a city, there's like a million other sounds going on. And so I just thought that was awesome to have those bells on there because that caught my attention way faster.
So I technically use the automatic fisherman snappers. They're a little bit different than the traditional autos. The traditional autos have this really loud snap to them, whereas mine do not. Mine are just a little more adjustable, both made by the same company, but I specifically bought bells that were different than what anyone else has, so that you can like pick them out. Even when you're fishing like a community hole like Summerfest, I'm like, oh, those are my bells, and then I can run for them. I also painted some of the stuff pink on mine as well, so it stands out like, oh, that's definitely mine.
So Jeff was asking if you were using blue tip bells, and no, we just brought this up, Jeff. If you're just tuning in, it's like the catfishing bells that
Like for open water.
you just clip onto the top.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was actually really awesome and something that we actually we have in our box already. So it's always fun to be able to do.
Didn't get away in the way of the actual fishing at all.
Mm-mm. The only thing is that
No.
then everybody knows you have a fish.
Well, then
This is true.
fish. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff, nice and easy. Also, like, so you're talking about you fish with the automatic fisherman.
Mhm.
But there's also there's a couple other options out there, and they range in price. There's some less expensive options that work. There's you can go all the way higher up that are more durable kind of options that are a little more expensive. So don't be afraid to look into this, because like Emily and I, we have the finicky foolers with the auto setting option, and they're a pretty bare bones setup, but we also use them for our snare rod holders because they have a
Just
really
to hold
nice
them.
base and they keep the rod really high up. And so those for us that's what works, just because like Emily said at the beginning of the show, we fish trout once a year. Maybe since we're friends with you now, we can maybe do twice a year now. But
Heck
so
yeah, and you know what? We have gear you can use too if you want to ever borrow ours. So
so there you go. So like so don't be afraid to look into all the options. If you get something a little less expensive that's maybe not as durable, or at least you get a little bit of a play into the game, and then you can spend the more money down the road and get something that's more dedicated.
Hero Fishing was checking in. So hello to you. He says, love the guillotine units. Got to give a shout out to those guys because I found out recently that they're local to us. And it turns out that we fish some of the same fishing holes and never bumped into each other. How crazy is that? Oh my gosh. So, we're here talking about ice season. I guess, do you have plans for the rest of your ice season?
I do. We're gonna go hit Lake Michigan later this week, and then we're actually going to Florida next week. I have a saltwater fly rod ready to rock. I'm gonna go play with some bass, see if I can catch some spotted trout, and then if the ice and weather cooperates, I will hit up some panfish as soon as I get back.
So that's actually really awesome. I think that there's a lot of people that can really relate to that this time of the year, dying to be on vacation, get a little blue skies and some sunshine. So I guess first of all, how do you go about like picking a destination or location down there to do something like that? I think a lot of people are eager to travel and don't know where to start.
So I'm kind of spoiled, and my boyfriend's family, they have a home down there, so we're gonna go stay with them. And yeah, there's a lot of really nice little bass ponds close by that the alligators are trapped out of, so there shouldn't be anything that I don't want to run into down there. And then we're gonna go out with a guide just because I'm totally unfamiliar with saltwater. And then I'm gonna go peruse the local fly fishing shops and see if they will help me out. Usually, I don't know about you, Josh, do you send Emily in if you guys ever need like tips to find like good fishing spots? Because that's what my boyfriend does to me, and it works like a charm.
I think, yeah, I think Emily is more apt to go ask.
Okay.
I guess, we don't really hit too many spots where we don't already have a game plan.
Well, we don't
Okay.
often buy live bait either. So we're
Right.
not often like going into shops. We often
Okay.
skip that stuff. But it is funny because we're good friends with BAC Guide Service up north in Wisconsin here. Fishes walleye, all kinds of stuff. Awesome person. And I remember one time me and his wife went to go and get minnows. And what do we go and get? Like we asked for
Yeah.
like 2 dozen minnows, or I don't know, whatever, for a normal day. And we came back with like
So
the
much.
cooler had more minnows than water. And I'm like, we only asked for 2
Seriously.
dozen. That's all we paid for.
Yeah,
But
so
I
if you
I
guys
think
do ever go anywhere where you don't know fishing spots, send Emily in. It works like a charm.
well,
They
and I
will
think
like feed you all their secret spots. They'll tell you where the fishing's great. It works great.
well, and I think to just thinking about it a little bit, Emily does get a lot more conversation done at the boat launch than I do.
Mhm.
If I'm set, if it, I'm putting the trailer away or whatever, and guys are hooking up, nobody talks to me, and then I go back, and Emily's on the dock talking with everybody, and so in that way, in a sense, yeah, that is a great tip.
Yeah.
Don't be
Yeah.
afraid, ladies, wives, go peruse around for some information.
Yeah, seriously, like people are so excited that there's more ladies in the fishing industry for the most part, and they are more than willing to like share their spots, tell you tips. Like I have the best luck with it ever. It's the same with kids. Like if you have a kid, send your child in. Like they will find out all the good spots. And it's really nice to see that shift with the industry.
hmm
Oh, that's funny. Tobin is laughing. He says he likes that tip. Yeah, I bet there's quite a few people laughing at home right now. Send your lives
So
in.
yeah, I'll let you know how Florida goes, you guys. But yeah, that's my plan on fly fishing. I'm gonna go find some local fly shops, have them hook me up with whatever they think I should use for flies, and just see if they have any suggestions for spots. So I'll let you know if it works out.
So as far as fly fishing in general, though, that is a hard thing, or can be a hard thing to get into. Did you just like pick up a fly rod one day, or did you have somebody who kind of taught you?
Oh gosh, I wish. I tried to learn how to do it on my own. I'm very stubborn. I tried for years to figure it out. Like I would watch YouTube videos, I'd be practicing out in the field. I was terrible at it. Um, honestly, what really helped me, I made friends with a local guide that does fly fishing, and like he taught me how to double haul, totally corrected my technique. If you want to learn how to fly fish, like guides are fantastic. So that's the route I would suggest. It would have saved me like 6 years of catching flies on myself, the trees, everything but getting them in the water. And even then, when I would get them in the water, it was like 5 or 10 feet out. Yeah, if you want to save yourself some trouble, like go hook up with someone that actually knows what they're doing in that industry. It's a tricky thing. It's like an art form. So I would highly suggest go make a friend that knows how to do it.
Well, and I even love the idea though of, going to a guide because it almost sounds so obvious, but I think so often people think of guides, oh, I need to go catch some fish. Where am I going to catch some fish? But so much of that comes along with learning the technique,
Mhm.
practicing that in order to be successful. And if you could take that time and not just come out with a fun memory, but come out with a new skill, that is really fabulous.
hmm
I agree 100%. Actually, the older I've gotten and the more I've gotten into the fishing industry, I traditionally will go out with like at least a couple of guides a year just because like even though I think I'm okay at fishing, I don't say I'm like a pro or anything, but like I catch fish a lot of the time. You learn so much and you learn different skills and it's great and you get to explore like something you would never have done by yourself, and it adds a whole new element to your fishing ability. I would highly suggest go with guides. I usually will go out like once or twice a year now anymore with guides, and it's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, that's so do you have like a specific guide that you want to share with people, or it's like top secret so that they don't end up booked up?
So I mean, you guys know Justin. I love
Adventure
him.
Wisconsin.
Yes, he's fantastic. If you can go out with him, I would highly suggest. I've inland trout fished my whole life, and he turned me on to some techniques that I had never even thought of, and it really stepped up my trout game. immensely. Like, I've caught way nicer trout since I went out with him, and he's just the nicest guy ever. So I would highly suggest if you can book a trip with him, he is fantastic.
It's funny that you bring that up because actually, we in the off season for ice fishing, I guess, also happen to love gardening. I'm pointing to my yard, like you can see that over here. But he does in his off season as well have like a really awesome greenhouse, and so we actually met him that way. And then we were actually lucky enough to go out with him one year. So I guess at this point it was a few years ago.
Yeah, it's a few years ago.
But one of the things that I remember about that trip and that I learned is just like how hard they worked for the fish and how much that they moved. Because I've been out with other fishermen before, and sometimes you don't move at all or whatever. And, there was so much, I guess, that I learned that day just from being with him. And it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was very fun. And Justin knows a lot about inland trout that you won't really find in a lot of other places. So, and if you get tired of talking trout or you want to talk about plants, Justin also likes to talk a lot about native plants. So if you either in the springtime, summertime, if you want to get a hold of him for his plants, go check him out in De Pere at the Stone Silo.
Yeah, there you go.
But Adventure Wisconsin for sure. Like that's one that I would say everybody should go at least once.
Agreed. I'm going to stop in there this next year. I had a horticulture minor, and I cannot wait to stop in and check that place out.
Yeah, absolutely worth the trip. This weekend we are going to Wisconsin Fishing Expo, and one of the things I'm excited to see is they usually have quite a selection of kayaks and all that kind of stuff. Because for years I have been planning kind of my dream kayak setup. So you were mentioning that you do go kayaking. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, okay, back in the day when I graduated nursing school, I had never kayaked, and my graduation present to myself was I booked a guided kayaking trip to the Apostle Islands with myself and my best friend. It was one of the coolest things I have ever done. It was on sea kayaks. We launched out of Bayfield Red Cliff area. Myself and my best friend, we had never kayaked before in our lives. They taught you how to flip them and how to be safe in them, paddle, all that stuff. And then we went and we camped on the Apostle Islands, and they cooked for us, and then we bombed through the sea caves. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done. When I got home from that trip, I went to Walmart and bought my very first kayak. In retrospect, I would not suggest you go to Walmart. Those kayaks, they're cheap, but they do not float. So if you tip it, it's going to sink to the bottom of the lake. So go to actually a kayak store where the kayaks float if you tip them. Also, if you go to a kayak store, they will teach you how to strap them down correctly on your vehicle. I'm surprised I made it home in one piece from Walmart. I watched a YouTube video and then I strapped it down. That was very sketchy. Would not suggest that. So people learn from my mistakes. Do not do what I did. But after that trip, I was completely hooked on kayaking. And the next step for me, I was like, so I have access to all these places boats don't have. I should probably start fishing, because literally you can launch all these lakes that boats can't launch. Like if there's a beach or a public park, you can launch your kayak there. So I had all this access to places that regular boats don't. So I had low fishing pressure, and it just honestly, it was one of the best things I could have ever done. I, to this day, still prefer fishing out of a kayak over the boat all day long.
I'm looking at Josh's face here, waiting for him to say something, because I know that we've gotten the itch for kayaks. We have, a few small lakes around by us that the only way you can get in them is with a kayak type situation. And man, I know that there's fish in there.
Yeah, if nobody else is fishing it, there definitely is. And okay, so me being the independent, really stubborn woman I am, I like to do everything by myself. So I like the kayak because I have to net the fish, I have to sell my own lines. It is completely me. No one is helping me. And yes, I know that is one of my fatal flaws, but I love that about kayaks because yeah, Like, you have to net them and everything all by your lonesome. No one's going to help you.
Josh always accuses me in the summer that I only catch more fish because I'm in the front of the boat. And although there may be something to that, I cannot wait to get kayaks so that we can prove that's true in any condition.
Also, like, I don't know about you, but I love my man, but sometimes I like to go on the opposite side of the lake. It's fine. Like, we both launch together. We'll check in with each other on the phone or walkie-talkies. But you know what? If I'm not feeling the social, I really like the fact that I'm like, okay, I'll catch up with you later. And then I go bomb over to the other side of the lake. It's great for relationships. I would highly suggest it.
Okay. Also, though, talkies, that is quality experience. I like that a lot. And sometimes your cell phone doesn't work. We're far north.
I know, and on Lake Michigan, like, your walkie-talkie doesn't work sometimes. So, yep, or your cell phone doesn't work, so you have to use walkie-talkie. So,
That's so funny. That's so funny.
sorry, Josh. The
No,
kayaks are the way to go.
No, I mean that's kind of what we've talked about too, is like, fishing as a team and being able to cover the whole body of water, even if it is small. Like, sometimes, sometimes one of us or the other will get, stuck on one place, and, you work and work in the one spot, and then you go and then you're like, okay, can we now go? And then you end up spending like an hour in another spot, and then you do really well, and it's like, well, how long could have we been doing this? And so that to me is something that is pretty important to me, I think. And plus,
Yeah.
I'm a huge like, I don't know, fishing to me is like mapping the lake and like learning structure and like, doing the technical stuff and like
Fishing to me is like finding fish.
yes. So,
We don't have this divide all that often, but there are days where
yeah.
No,
So
and too, it's nice. You
Yeah.
can divide and conquer, and then you call yours together when you're like, oh, I found the fish, and then they can come meet you. It works like a charm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, I know that, especially if I'm willing to share fish, he's willing to share maps. So we just got to hone in on this. That's
I
funny.
love it. I love it.
So one of the other things I wanted to make sure that I talked about while we were together, actually is kind of women's gear in ice season. I know that Stryker is a really awesome company, but one of the things that they are aiming to do kind of purposely is, have quality gear for ladies that is functional. And so I know that you wear some awesome stuff. I know that there's the Stella, there's the Prism, there's some options these days. What do you wear?
So I'm wearing the Stella suit this season. I freaking love it. That thing has been so warm. So we like to run and gun a lot. We don't always set up the shanty. We go out when other people are like, why are you going out fishing? It's miserable out. That suit has been fantastic. It is so warm. I wear a single base layer over it. Sometimes I'll put a heated vest on. I never have to turn it on though. That thing is so warm and it's tough. We hike into lakes a lot of the time too. It is put up with my abuse hardcore. I love that suit.
Yeah, I actually also have been running that Stella suit. And, those bibs, it is really awesome because it does fit way better. I love the climate. I do really love that climate, but the Stella fits me a whole lot better. And so again, not to keep talking about it, but I was at Battle on Bago this weekend, and one of the things is going into that tent. Sometimes it gets muddy. They have all the heaters going on in there, and that's actually not on the ice. That's on the land. And so to be able to still have my suit, because we were in a tent, even though it was outside, but not be, tracking through all that mud. Honestly, it was one of the times that I was so thankful for that suit.
I honestly love the colors too. Like, me being a girl, I freaking love the colors they came out with. They're so cute.
Yeah. The other thing that I always mention is with the jacket, because I don't normally wear a jacket. All of my other seasons, do different layering and stuff. But I found this year that I can actually move enough in that jacket that I do find myself wearing it.
No, so when I first got it, I made a really obnoxious video and I was doing like push-ups and stuff in it. It is extremely movable. Like you can do anything in that. I love it.
That's actually really funny. If that video still exists somewhere, I'm gonna have to go check that out.
It does.
It is true though. It is true though.
I was getting bored and we didn't get ice early, so it was like I got to do something. And I kept putting on my ice gear and I was ready for ice season, but the weather was not cooperating. So I got punchy and there's videos.
That's funny. We got ice, I think, a little bit before you guys this year, so next year we'll just have to have you up.
Sounds good.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So as we are, I guess, looking forward to the end of ice season and into open water, I guess, do you have any other plans or any other things coming up that you can share with us?
I do. So I took off a week in April that I'm hoping to be out on Lake Michigan. Typically that time of year, there's not a ton of pleasure boaters and people aren't really out yet because the weather's still kind of gross, but the winds died down, so the fishing tends to be really good. So I'm hoping to be putting in some hours on my kayak. And then May, I'm doing some inland trout fishing with Justin in your guys' neck of the woods. So may or may not harass you guys after I finish with Justin. But yeah, I try to put in like in May, I do like to go for inland trout. And if the weather's not cooperating up by you guys, I like to go back towards the driftless area. I'm from Mount Horeb, Wisconsin originally, so I've spent a lot of time like on that side of the state as well.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we would love for you to bug us and we would love to go and catch some trout and
Yep.
check that all out. So that'll be a whole bunch of fun. So as far as those adventures, I know that I can't wait to follow along with that. For people at home that want to follow along as well, can you share with us how they can do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook. I made a page. There's the Ice Fishing Diaries, and that's just where I will share most of my fishing adventures. Otherwise, on Instagram, you can look up at Outdoors Nurse Kimber. And honestly, if you really want to know what I'm up to, my Instagram, that's probably the culprit for the stuff I post on the most. So check out the Instagram.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm going to check that out. And I imagine a bunch of people at home are going to as well, because you got a lot of fun adventures coming up and kind of all across the different temperature ranges, you know, some traveling and back to ice and then back to open water and all of that.
Yep.
So really looking forward to that. With that, we appreciate you being here tonight, and it's been a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you guys again. I really appreciate you having me on tonight.
Yeah. And to the people at home, thank you guys for being here as well, because it is always a lot of fun to, you know, talk fishing and hear all your questions and different input and all of that. So appreciate you guys as well. Other than that, looking forward to next week's edition of Hook, Line, and Striker.
Night, everybody.